So this testimony comes at a really interesting time for me because I just graduated college last week.
Congratulations.
So did I. Super excited. We're done. And I learned a ton from college, like so much. But due to time, I'm going to talk about like 3 things that I really learned that God did for me during college, which is He taught me that I can handle new things. He showed me that He's still with me when I make decisions for myself. And He really solidified for me what Philippians 4 talks about. So the first one, God taught me that I can handle new things. With the exception of kindergarten, 1st grade, and 6th grade, I was homeschooled my whole life. And I really loved it. Like, we got to travel around the world and go to Bulgaria and India and random places. And we experienced things that I can't even believe were real looking back. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. But at the time when I was growing up, I would often talk to people who were my age that were in high school, and I would feel like, oh, I'm missing something, like they're talking about stuff and I don't know what they're talking about. And I felt like they were in like the secret high school club and I didn't know the password and I was just like, I don't know. So when the time came to start college, I was terrified, honestly. I started at PCC, also with Anthony, and I remember so clearly the night before, like I was trying to go to sleep, but then I just started sobbing because I was so afraid. I was just like, what if there was some vital information in high school that I completely missed out on, and I'm going to therefore fail? Like, literally, the last time that I was in a classroom with more than 8 people in it was when I was 6. So that's very likely that I might miss something, But my first class was Intro to Philosophy with Mr. Justice Richards, and I could go on and on about that man, how much I love him and respect him. But basically, he was the perfect professor to have my first class with because his teaching style and personality like perfectly aligned with me and what I needed to like know that I could handle college. And I know it was a God thing that I got him. And I could go on and on about that class and why, but that's the general gist is him as a professor. And after that class, I would choose classes that I knew would like push me and would help me to learn and grow as a person because I knew like I can handle this, So the second God lesson came when it was time to transfer. My whole time at PCC, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but by the time I get to the end, I'll totally know where I want to go and what I want to do. And then the time came, and I was like no closer to knowing than when I first started. Except for maybe I was 100% sure I did not want to do political science, I guess. But I was so positive that God would just tell me what I was supposed to do and where I was supposed to go. So I was like, I'm not worried about it. But the time was getting really close, and it was like, he had been so talkative to me up until that point, and then it was like someone hit the mute button on his end of the phone, and I was like, I don't think I changed anything. What's happening? Why aren't you telling me what to do? And my attitude was just like, he's God, not me. He knows way better what I'm supposed to do. I'll just do exactly what he wants me to do, and then that's the end of it. Like, simply how I want to live, But it didn't matter. It was just silence, and it didn't matter how mad I was about that. There was just silence. So yeah, I was forced to make a decision, and it was like a scary one. College is big life thing, I was almost at the deadline for applying to schools, and I still had no idea what to do. And I was talking to Melinda at the Boys and Girls Club, and she was like, have you thought about teaching for like kindergarten and 1st grade? And for some reason, that was the first time that anything had sat with me well, and I was like, Melinda, thank you. So I decided to do teaching, and I applied to a couple schools under liberal studies, and I decided on Northridge. Even though I was like, okay, God, I've made a couple decisions, so now it's your turn, like, which school? And no answer, so I was like, oh, okay, I'll just go to Northridge because I know people there, and my mom used to work there. Now she still does, but that's another story. So I went to Northridge, and my first semester, I realized I hated teaching, and I realized it was more about how to teach children rather than like learning just about how they learn and stuff like that, like learning about children. And then also there was a lot of lesson plans for homework, and I was like, no. And so I was freaking out, and I talked to a career counselor, and they were like, well, you could try child development because that's, you have more options career-wise than teaching, so maybe you'd like that. But you have to switch now. Like, you have to make a decision this semester or they're not going to let you switch. And I was like, help me out here. So I decided to switch, and I took the jump. It's getting a little bit easier as I go to make these decisions, And yeah, so I switched, and it turned out it was like the best decision because I absolutely loved child development. I learned so much, and all of my classes I loved, and my teachers, and just tons of things. And I got to do an awesome internship working with kids with autism, and it was just like really amazing. Like, it was definitely the degree that matched my heart. And so it was really cool because even though God didn't tell me in advance what I had to do, I felt like, looking back, like He guided the whole thing, because it turned out like I couldn't have planned it better, and yet I had to sort of plan. So it was like interesting to see that He had His hand on it, even when He wasn't explicitly telling me what to do beforehand. And then the final thing was, I feel like my whole college experience kind of got summed up in this little bundle in this past semester when I took a class, and it really taught me the meaning of Philippians 4. So I'll read you the verse. It starts with verse 8. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And then skipping down to verse 11. I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through Him who gives me strength. So this class that I took, Alternative Approaches to Discipline, the fact that I took that class at all was another God story, because I didn't need it. It was only for units, and I had too many units, so it was like, I really didn't need it for anything. But I took this class, and I'll tell you a few snippets from it. One of the concepts that I learned in the class was a concept of called acceptance, which is basically saying in a situation, things aren't how I'd like them to be, but they are what they are. And that's it. I'm going to accept that. And it works really well when working with kids and they're screaming on the floor. Like, it's a good way of going. And so thinking about my life, it's funny because I feel like I learned two things by when God went kind of quiet on me, which is I had to learn to trust that He can take care of me even when my individual human consciousness is involved of having to make my own decisions. But I also had to learn that some things are totally out of my control, and that's okay, which is the idea of acceptance. And I learned to be content taking control and making decisions, and I learned to be content letting go and not fighting life. College taught me that God is so beautifully simple by guiding me even when I don't realize He's doing it, but He's also beautifully complex by not directly guiding me to ensure that I learn how to make decisions and do the best that I, Holly, can do. I've often heard the phrase, like, more of you, God, and less of me, and I think that's a great phrase, and that was, like, my life motto, like, all of my teenage years. But interestingly, I think God actually had to knock that out of me a bit, and I don't get me wrong, I really think that the life is about God and about living in relationship with Him, and that the more we become like God, the more we're able to live well and thrive and love other people. But there's a difference between being a robot doing exactly what you're told because you've calculated that that's the best path forward, and being in a relationship. And I like to think of it in child development terms because that's my major that I love. And so I think of it like if a parent is working on a puzzle with a little kid, and the puzzle is like very easy for the parent. They can figure out how to solve it by glancing at it. But the kid is like struggling, and they look up at the parent and they're like, I can't do this. And so there's kind of like two paths that can diverge. On this side, the parent can say, okay, pick up that piece, put it right there. Pick up that piece, put it right there. Keep going until it's completed. Or they can say, okay, let's look, like, are there any pieces that you can see a pattern with? Like, do you see the little edge? Okay, where do you think that goes, Or maybe move the puzzle piece closer to the spot so that the kid can be like, wait, and then figure it out themselves. Yeah. And in the first way, it doesn't help the parent. They know the puzzle. It's not like it's hard for them or fun for them. And it doesn't help the child because they don't learn how to think for themselves and make connections. Yeah. In the second one, they do. They learn how to think and how to solve problems and make those connections, and it's having a relationship with the parent. Yeah. And so it's like working together on things. And yeah, so anyway, that was like a cool thing. And then going back to the Philippians chapter, part of my class taught us about how we have the ability to choose. And it's a much longer story, but part of it is that we can, by taking control of our thoughts and our actions, what we do, that indirectly controls our emotions and our physiology, so like literally how we feel. And that might sound a little bit like the positive thinking, new age kind of thing, but it's not. It's like literally what Philippians 4 is talking about. If anything is beautiful, if anything is pure, like think about those things. It really does affect your life. And I don't think that that's random that Paul put that part and then a couple verses down said, I've learned the secret of being content. It really is like, it makes a huge difference what you think about. And that was, this class really gave me ideas for living that I'd never really had before on how to apply that. And it was so cool. And it brought me so much joy and so much thankfulness to God for it. And the night before my last final, which was like last week, I found myself kind of bookmarking my college experience by sobbing. But this time, it wasn't because I was afraid, it was because I was just so enormously, like filled with such enormous gratitude, and I couldn't believe how much God had done for me and taken care of me and taught me. And it's an experience, college is an experience that I'm just never going to forget, and gratitude does not even begin to cover what I feel about it. So, yeah, it's changed my life for the better, and that's all.